Hey guys, welcome back. I'm gonna go outside and prune some trees, do a little update video of the ones I did last year, show progress since then. So stick around. So an important part about pruning is you have to sterilize everything because you don't want to transfer any kind of diseases, bacteria, fungus diseases into the fresh cuts on the new tree. So normally I'll use rubbing alcohol, but with the whole coronavirus thing going on right now, I don't want to use up any rubbing alcohol for pruning trees. So this is another alternative is just boil it in hot water. It'll get rid of most of the stuff you care about. So I thought it would be interesting to track a tree's progression. So here's the one peach tree right when I planted it. This is basically later the same summer. And then I kind of read up about sheet mulching and the importance of wood chip, so I wood chipped it. Kind of can't see the tree, but this is it right after pruning it in the late winter. And then later in the summer, this is the tree right here and how it responded. You can see extremely vigorous growth. Very, very interesting. So again, it went from this as the final pruning state to this in the summertime full growth. And now we'll see what it looks like right now. Okay, so here's the Genesis peach, my first peach tree. Last year I did a pruning video on this tree, so you can see how it responded. It's really important to learn the actions that you take and the response and observe those things so that the next year when you go do them, similar changes, you can adjust your game plan. So overall, looking at this tree, I kind of like what it did, to be honest. A lot of the growth has really pushed out to opening the vase up. Obviously, there's always going to be some inside growth and vertical growth to try to capture that space back. An important aspect about trees is if you try to cut them down and keep them low, a tree wants to be a certain size. So if you go too far down to what its natural height is, typically the ratio is somewhere around 2/3. If you cut it down below 2/3 of how big it wants to be, it's going to vigorously sucker. So it's going to send up a bunch of vertical growth. So if you see that happening, you can adjust by letting some of those vertical suckers reach a little bit of a higher height before you prune them off again to try to kind of maintain the height of your tree. Now for me, I'm not as concerned about fruit production from these trees. I'm kind of trying to build a beautiful area to walk around, and the side benefit is getting fruit. So I actually want my trees to obtain full height, even if it makes my life down the road a little bit more difficult to get some of the fruit. I don't mind wasting some fruit and giving that back to nature, even just letting it rot on the ground, picking it up, maybe composting it, but growing bacteria and soil microbiology with the sugars in the fruit. I'm okay with that. So my goal for these trees is not going to necessarily to train their height and keep them managed at a low height where I can pick them easily. It's going to be kind of to make them aesthetically pleasing, open up sunlight to the center, get wind flow going to the center, and try to keep fungal diseases from damaging and destroying my trees. Because water will sit on leaves for longer. So you want nice airflow through the middle of the tree. You want light through the middle of the tree. Some places call that a chimney. So you want to kind of open up the chimney to just allow that light and airflow. For a vase prune tree, where it kind of goes up, you cut it low and then you prune the suckers to go out like a wine cup, like a vase. You still want the same thing. You want chimneys, but you kind of want them along each branch. So let's talk quickly about what a chimney is and how you can select different branches for, to help you shape the tree, kind of get your pruner's eye, they call it, get your pruner's eye developed. So let's talk about a little bit of that. Okay, so the best way that I can talk about a chimney is by using a central leader style pruned tree. So this is a pear tree and it's pruned to a central leader. So a central leader means essentially you allow one main branch to grow up and become, you know, whatever height you want it to be, whatever height the tree wants it to be, wants itself to be. And then you prune around that. You'll typically pick 12 to 15 branches interspaced all around the tree, and choose those ones to be branches that are going to support fruit in the future. Pick good crotch angles and everything. Now up the central branch, you want to open up the same idea as a vase shaped tree. You want to open up a column down the middle of the tree of light and air so that light can get in from the top and increase the amount of light that the fruit around the inside of the tree is going to absorb and turn into healthy ripened fruit, and then also dry out leaves and wind flow as well, air and wind flow to dry out leaves to prevent fungal diseases. So a good rule of thumb, and I picked this up from Stefan Subkowiak, I hope I didn't butcher your name, is based on the diameter of the tree, you want to have roughly 3 or so diameters around that to be open. So on a tree roughly this big, which is maybe 2 inches or so, roughly 2 thumbs, you want to have, you know, roughly the width of your hand free around the trunk. So some of this stuff, this tree, for example, was a total mess when I first got it. And I've been slowly working on pruning it back and opening it up. But at the same time, there's a lot that I can do. There's some really poor crotch angles in this tree, very vertical V angles. You want them more like 45 degrees. So there's a lot of stuff that I can do to this tree to kind of help it out. But for the first part is you want to really work on opening up the chimney in the center of the tree. Okay, so what that does not mean is that it does not mean that I'm going to go and prune off any branch, you know, that's in the middle of the tree, because I'll just basically have a long vertical stick. But what it does mean is any branch that comes off, such as this one, if it's long enough to be a branch and not short enough to just be in the way, for example, this one here, I'm going to remove. Sorry, I know I sometimes don't finish my sentences. This one here, for example, it's not long enough to become a branch. So it's going to try to fruit off of this wood, and it's too close to the center. I don't like that. So what I'm actually going to do with this one, it didn't grow enough, so I'm going to cut it off. Okay, and then you typically don't want to leave too much. You don't want to cut too far into the collar. I don't know how well it's going to focus. So you don't want to cut too far into the collar. You want to cut it, you know, right where it starts to swell, so that it'll callus over and heal. This one here is a good example. It's a branch that's coming off at a decent angle. It's occupying, if I step back, it's occupying a decent space, 3D in the tree where there's no other competing branches. So it's a very valuable branch. I'll be probably keeping this one. But here, if you look at it, there's really within, you know, within that range of the tree. Sorry, the sun's right in your eyes. Within that range of the tree, there's really no branches, just this one here, and it's vertical up, and this one here, and it's going into the tree. So those are good candidates to pop off. So we don't want them developing any further. And this one here is growing vertically into the tree. This little side branch is a perfect example. We're going to open up the chimney. It has no business being here, so we're going to remove that. Now this one here, coming off the center of the branch, I want it clear, you know, roughly 6 inches or so around. So I'm going to take all of these off. And now if I do this all the way through the tree, I'm going to open up the center chimney of this tree. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow airflow and light to come right down the middle of the tree and really flush the center of the tree out. Okay, so let's go back to the peach. Now for this peach, we want the same thing, but I'm going to take it a little further, and we want to kind of do it for each of the main branches coming off. This one here, this one here, this one here. We're going to do that center chimney idea on all of those branches. And we're going to do it also for the middle. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to cut, and it's a good way to kind of do some easy cuts and open up the tree so you see what you're doing. I'm going to play this in fast forward, and I'm going to trim out any inward growing branch, any branch growing straight downwards. So if you take any kind of branch, we'll take this one here, one that I'm probably going to keep, this one here. Any branch, if you run your hand along the top that's growing straight vertical up, is going to come out. Any branch that's growing inwards to the center of the tree is going to come out, and any branch that's going straight downwards on the bottom is going to come out as well. Okay, so I'm going to do that for this whole entire tree, and I'll play it in fast forward. Those are easy cuts. We know they're coming out, and then we can see the tree a little better, and we can adjust our pruning after that. Okay, so there's a decent start. I could do a whole lot more. Remember that I'm actually pruning these so that they kind of look very full and bushy, not so much for fruit. If I wanted to go for fruit only, I'd probably cut out another half of the tree. Maybe like a solid third of the tree more I would cut out. For now though, I'm gonna move to the next step, which is to kind of look for competing branches. So here's a really good example. Right here, we have main branch coming up here. We have two coming up there. They're all kind of competing for the same spot in the same location. They're filling out very nicely. So I can actually come in and because this one here is roughly maybe 60% the diameter of this one, the main branch, this one's going to really starve out this main branch if I leave it. And because it's kind of occupying a space between this one and this one, if you kind of zoom out, it's kind of filling in this location where all of these branches on these other ones will actually occupy that sunlight space. So now this year, I'm okay actually taking this whole branch out. So I'm going to take this whole entire branch out. Now, actually, technically, I should have done, oh, stuck on my mic. I should have done sorry for swinging the camera around. I should have done an undercut first. I wouldn't have had this little lip. Should always do an undercut first and then go over top. It'll just make it less likely that you kind of strip the bark down. And then you should also always use a pruning saw. I didn't talk about this. A pruning saw is better than loppers because loppers will actually crush the cambium in the wood. Once the tree's down and you're just trying to you know, break it into smaller pieces, use the loppers because they're easier. But when you're cutting the actual tree that you want to keep, you want to use a pruning saw or really nice sharp pruning shears that are both are disinfected. Okay, so now with that one gone, you can see that if I hadn't taken that one out, I would have had to remove a lot of these branches because they would have been really competing for the same sunlight space. But now I can take this one out here because it's mostly growing vertical and I don't want that. And it was kind of competing the same space. And then I can take out some of these smaller ones. If a branch is really small, it's not going to really, first off, it's not going to produce very much fruit. It's not going to have very much flow of nutrients into the fruit. And it's also going to have a really hard time supporting the weight of the fruit, especially if it overbears. So now I'm looking really for branches that are coming out and competing with the same light area. And I want to selectively take out vertical growing branches because vertical branches will grow into, will basically not fruit. So it'll try to just grow into more vegetative growth on the tree. And I do want fruit, even though it's not my main concern. But if you have branches that are like this, you're going to grow a tree. If you have branches that are like this, you're going to grow fruit. And it's based on the hormone flows through the actual tree. Now for me, I have a lot of vertical stuff on the peach because the peach is actually on a very rigorous root stock and it's a tall growing tree. So it's still trying to get up to its max height. So that's just something that I'm going to have to deal with for the short time. Now if I look at this one, I have 3 main branches coming off, all filling the same space, and they're really, really competing for each other. So I have a couple choices here, and I might not make the decision quite yet, because what I want to look at is when I'm going to probably pick either only taking out the middle one, or possibly taking out one of these and then cutting the other 2 at different areas to promote growth growing out sideways. But what I really need to do is look at some of these lateral branches coming off of those and what shape they will fill. And to be honest, looking at it now, I really like the idea of taking this middle guy out. So I'm going to take this one out, I believe. And this is something that you're just going to have to practice and get good at. Sorry, I'm just going to put the camera down and do this properly. Okay, so it was a bit of a tight cut and I did nick the branch, but it's a good opportunity to talk about this. So as you can see, I did nick the branch. As long as you didn't nick it through more than 50%, this will absolutely totally heal and will not be a problem at all. So don't worry too much about that. Even if you crack a branch, as long as half of the cambium, as long as half of the wood, the green wood, is intact, that tree will be totally fine and can handle that. Okay, so this is this area here. These 2 branches are kind of competing for the same space. Another thing to look out for is if you have a walkway between trees and you have a branch that's growing straight out into the walkway, you should probably preferentially cut that one because it's just going to get worse over time. Now this one here is a good example of that. It's not really occupying a space that I don't want other branches to occupy. This one in the future might be able to occupy some of this space, but I can take this one off at least to this node here. And there's nothing wrong with that as well. As if I want to leave this, and I'm not sure what my decision is going to be, I'm going to take this off just above that node, and then now the tree will grow out this way and occupy some of this other space. Next year, when this one grows out a little more, I might take this branch here off completely. For now, we might leave it. And I'm just going to clean up a little more of the tree in other spots in a similar way, taking out competing areas. Like for example, this, I left this because I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to keep it, but now looking, it's not really doing anything for me. So I'm actually just going to take it off. Take off some of these ones growing back towards the middle of the tree. And I'll just keep tidying it up and I'll catch up with you in a few minutes. Okay, now a couple other things I've done is I've taken the height down of these and I've cut them at an outward facing branch so that it keeps doing a vase shape as it goes out. And what I want to do when I'm keeping the tree's height controlled, like I said, I do want it to get high, but at the same time, I want roughly all of the branches around the tree to be roughly the same height. If some are unequally taller than the other ones, they'll starve flow of nutrient and sap up the tree. So what I did is these other ones were quite a bit taller than the rest of the tree. There's one in the back there that's quite a bit taller, this one here. So I'm going to pick an outward facing bud, and I'm going to cut just in front of that, just on top of that, above that bud, so that it'll continue to go out, but the height of the tree will be somewhat controlled. I would go normally, say this was a full fruit production tree, I would go quite a bit lower on them, but you can see some of the height of some of these. And then the last, well, maybe not the last, but another thing you want to kind of look at when you're cleaning up and figuring out which branches you want to clean out of competing spaces, there's a lot of competition going on in here, is just to make it easier on you, pick a certain size and just choose anything smaller than this is going to go. And then that'll kind of be your starter. This is a very tiny one here. So anything smaller than a certain size you're going to take out. And then you can just kind of go through the tree like that, and that will kind of help you make some decisions. Typically what it'll do is it'll clean out some of the lower level branches, but that's totally okay because next year's growth will regrow from there, and that's totally fine. So take out the smaller stuff. Okay, so that's it. I'm not going to fart around with this one too much. One thing I've learned is there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just whatever you think. You know, there are things that work better than others, and there's an overarching goal that you want to do, but get creative and do whatever you want to do and see how it works. But document it, just like I'm doing right now, so that you can look back and see the response to your actions and then adjust. So I think that's pretty good for now. Yeah, we'll see how this thing turns out next year.